Hi, this is Richard DeBoer with the Calgary Mosquito Society. We recently held our legally required annual general meeting, and we normally wrap these meetings up with a bit of a slideshow about what we've been up to in the past year, both in terms of the restoration of the airplanes and also our other involvements, community interactions, all that sort of thing. Somebody asked me if they could get a copy of it, so I'm having to re-record it here for them to be able to share with their friends or see it again. So last year, because of COVID, we didn't actually do an annual general meeting. So this show actually covers the last 2 years. So let's start back at March of 2019. I made a trip up to Wetaskiwin to do an inspection of the hurricane here. I had to do that every quarter, but I was normally up there 2 or 3 times a year in addition to those regular visits, delivering parts and resolving issues and, going over lots of details about the airplane. I was extremely fortunate on this visit to have company. The gentleman to the left is Gordon Hill, who actually flew this hurricane during World War II when they were both with 133 Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Gordon went on to fly in Europe, a number of marks of Spitfire, but his career as a fighter pilot actually started on this very airplane, along with the other Hurricanes of 133. So I was very grateful to be able to spend the time with him back and forth to Wetaskiwin to get his impressions, his stories, his experiences of flying these airplanes. Now, back to the Bomber Command Museum, which is where we've got the Mosquito, of course. This is the rear port side of the fuselage. And what the guys are doing here is putting on a section of new skin on the fuselage. They're connecting a couple of airlines, and you can see that there's a plastic covering with tape around it. And we've sealed off this area so that we can attach the new skin with a vacuum system, creating even pressure across all of its surface to get really good adhesion here. If you take a look at other areas on the fuselage, you can see that there are marks on a lot of the balsa wood there, because any new material that we add into the airframe, we identify it as having been put there by us, so that there's a complete record of what we've done on the airplane. You can see our stamp on the balsa wood here. This is Dick working on a couple of the holes in the fuselage. When Spartan Air Services operated these airplanes, they put a couple of portholes in the rear fuselage for the camera operator who sat back there. The poor guy needed a bit of light, and perhaps he wanted to see what the outside world looked like rather than being just confined in the rear fuselage there. These portholes were covered over by somebody else, so we've had to restore that whole area to put these back. The inside of the rear fuselage, you can see that we've stripped it right down to the bare wood. Most of this work was done with basic hand tools, just picks and scrapers and all that sort of thing, just to get down to the wood to see what needed replacing. The 3 holes here are actually for the downward identification lights. And you can see we've pulled up the center strip that joined the halves of the fuselage here and really brought it down to absolute bare bones. So then we can do structural repairs and start reinstalling all of the mechanical components of the fuselage here. Now, being involved in these projects means lots of people are watching what we're doing. They're very interested in what we're up to and all this sort of thing. This gentleman, Jim Gervan, is from Eastern Canada. I believe his father worked for de Havilland or worked in a company that built components for them. If you're up on the Mosquito, you'll recognize what this piece is. It's one of the hard rubber pucks that are in the undercarriage gear legs. And de Havilland used these in the place of hydraulics, stacking a number of these on top of each other to give the undercarriage its cushioning properties. Jim had this sitting in the house for many decades. There was a little story that went along with it, how his father acquired it and such. And he simply wanted to help out, contribute something to the restoration. So we were very glad to receive this from him. Something else we were involved in here is Gordon Wilson, a couple of years ago, published a book on the Merlin engine and was looking for photos. So we happily sent him along a few pictures. The one in the upper right here does appear in his book, and this is our crew working on the Packard Merlin 29 that we've installed into the Hurricane. What we're doing here is just reinstalling the bank for the engine after we've done a complete top overhaul on it. Gordon's got another book that he's working on right now called The Engines of Bomber Command. So again, we've sent him a whole bunch of photos, and hopefully he'll include a few in that volume as well. Of course, we're always very interested and involved in what our hosts at the Bomber Command Museum are doing. In the spring of 2019, they acquired a new airplane for their collection, a Tiger Moth, of course. This particular airplane belonged to Gordon Jones of High River. Gordon was an instructor during World War II at an elementary flying training school. And after the war, he acquired this particular Tiger Moth, and it was one that he had instructed on during World War II. Gordon passed away a few years ago, and the family thought it would be appropriate to donate this airplane to the Bomber Command Museum. Now, they already had a Tiger Moth, a static display version, and here you can see them making some floor space for the new arrival by hoisting their first Tiger Moth up to the ceiling here. Lots of people are interested in what we're doing with the Hurricane and the Mosquito here. Classic Wings magazine has been following both of our projects and have printed a number of articles and photos of the restoration process. Here they're covering the Hurricane. They've done other pieces on the Mosquito as well. And we're very happy that they and other fans are interested in what we're doing here. Out of the States, Air Classics magazine took an interest in what we're doing as well. I have kind of mixed feelings about these guys. Air Classics was kind of the gateway drug for me into the old airplane business. As a kid, I would always pick up their magazines on the newsstand. But in following our projects and putting out articles about them, they don't bother to talk to us. They don't seek permission or input or agreement or anything of the kind. They simply go straight to our website, pirate pictures off of there, and paraphrase some of our text, which sadly in North America is legal. So, you know, kind of a double-edged sword here. Thanks for the interest. But back to the rear fuselage of the Mosquito, some interesting stuff going on here. Steve's in there. You can see he's priming the inside of the fuselage. If you look at the upper right side, you can see there's a bunch of plastic here. And when we're vacuum attaching the new skins to the outside of the fuselage, we need to seal the inside too, because there are lots of air leaks in the wood itself and in the joints. So that all has to be sealed off. For the real aficionado of the Mosquito, a couple of other points of interest. This is the access hatch for the guy who works in the back here. These are the two portholes that I referred to earlier for the camera operator, who actually sat right about here. And this bulkhead, you can see, has an odd shape to it, and that was modified by Spartan for the camera operator. So I'd actually be standing in the camera bay, which would have been pointed straight down for their aerial photo mapping work. On the outside of the airplane, there's Gary working on a new skin, of course. Again, one of the portholes and our vacuum attach system for the new skin going on. Yes, Davey, one of our devoted volunteers, demonstrating how best to keep your eyeglasses on when you're working inside the airplane, and it may get a little hot and sweaty and they keep slipping off your face. Davey spent a lot of hours inside the fuselage here doing lots of different work. We have a wonderful photo of him as well, kind of looking like Shrek. Him and his coveralls completely coated in little chips of green paint as he scraped away many layers of old primer and such from inside the fuselage. Here's one of our other volunteers, Roger Dainton, lying to some visitors. We all like to put down the tools and chat with the folks who come by and visit, talk to them about our restoration work and about the history of the airplane, even if it isn't always true. Again, back to our hosts here at the Bomber Command Museum. Another fairly recent acquisition for them is this Cessna crane. This is a physically flyable airplane, although not legally so. There was a dispute between the donor and his restoration shop, and the airplane did not come with any of the logbooks, so it would not be legal for flight. Not that the museum would be flying anyway, so they will haul this out onto the tarmac for engine run days, as they do with a number of the airplanes, including the Lancaster, of course. Back to Wetaskiwin, this would have been June of 2019. Greg on the left, Buck on the right here, working on the markings of the airplane. There are no stickers or decals on this airplane. This is all hand-painted stuff, from the camouflage through to the roundels and all the markings. We're very grateful to our board member, Andy Worley, who spent many, many hours working on the proper colors and markings for this airplane. We did have one wartime photo of the airplane from which to give us some idea of what it looked like and where everything properly belonged. And Andy had to scale those and locate them and do a tremendous amount of work to provide all the details on what went where. I think there are actually 11 different colors of paint just on the outside of the airplane here. Point of pride for us is that this Hurricane has a complete set of original Browning 303 caliber machine guns. And of course, it's got the 12-gun wing. So we've got a complete set here. Hats off to our board members, Don and Bert, who became our armorers or arms dealers in locating a lot of these pieces for the airplane. I think the most that we paid for any one of them was about $1,600, but then some of them were donated to us as well. Some of the guns that Don and Bert came up with, we had to take to a gun shop to get them deactivated because they were acquiring fully functional machine guns. They've all been deactivated now. And as a further point of pride, none of the guns is dated any later than when our airplane was manufactured, which is 1942. How many airplanes, how many Hurricanes in the world today would sport a complete set of original machine guns? Very likely not many at all. So back to Nanton here, the guy's working on what we had built early on in the process, which was a cockpit mock-up here. What they're doing is actually removing all of the original pieces that we'd installed in this cockpit mock-up. And this goes back to 2012 that we built this. But with our progress on the fuselage, it's now time to take all of the mechanical components that were on the display here, restore them, and install them in the actual fuselage itself. So we've got Peter here, Don, and Davey working away on our Saturday workday. Something else that Jack and Colette developed here were these little keychain attachments here. We had a company in Calgary that laser etched our logo, which was very nice. These pieces are actually comprised of two different layers of plywood. You can see the nice clean piece where our logo is. This is brand new wood that we acquired for the Mosquito. And this plywood is the exact same technical spec as what de Havilland used back in 1940 and throughout the war. These are little offcut pieces, so don't worry, we're not, throwing away perfectly good wood. The backside here is original wood off of this very airframe. So those two halves are sandwiched together, and they sell well at open house days and off our website. We were invited to speak at the COPA convention, and that's the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. They held their annual convention in Innisfail, Alberta that year, and invited us to come up and do a presentation for their convention. Talked about the Hurricane, its restoration, its history, and all that sort of thing. And yeah, had a very good time, was very well received, and we're always happy to come out and chat with groups about our projects. Weather was not good for their convention, sadly. It was raining, and I think about 2 degrees. There was snow at higher altitudes. So welcome to June in Alberta. June also saw our annual Mosquito Celebration Day at the Bomber Command Museum. The museum, of course, does a whole series of special event, open house, and engine run days, and they always reserve one of those to be themed around the Mosquito. And these are tremendous days for us. We get to talk about our project, our restoration, the history of the Mosquito, how this particular one was used, and all that sort of stuff. Don in the upper left here has put together a really nice display about how Spartan used the airplanes for their photo mapping work. And he's got examples, actual photographic print examples of some of the work that Spartan did with our very airplane. These photos were taken out of CF-HMS and then turned into maps here. It's a fascinating process, and Spartan Air Services was an absolute world leader in this business. Down below, we've got Vanna and Penny doing some book sales for us, you know, helping to raise a little bit of money as part of the good cause as well. Upper left here, our head of restoration and association vice president, Jack, doing a talk about the restoration of the mosquito. We had an absolute full house on this particular day. The place was packed with people coming to see what we were doing, so that's very gratifying. In the afternoon, I did a talk, me down there, doing an F for Freddie presentation, which I hadn't done there for probably 10 years or something. Again, very well attended, excellent day. And of course, one of the features of these days too is that they always haul the lank out and do engine runs both in the morning and afternoon. And on Mosquito Celebration Day, the museum was good enough to allow our volunteers to ride in the cockpit for the engine run occasions. So in the morning, let's see, we've got Peter, Robin, and Dick, who got to enjoy the sights and sounds from inside the airplane. And then in the afternoon, it was Stephen with his sons, Matthew and Andrew. And when we were offering this to Stephen, you know, we said, would the boys want to take a ride? Stephen said, well, how many people can fit up there when you do this? And we told him, well, it's 3 people, so you can go too. Oh, good, he says, that way I don't have to kill one of my kids to get a ride. July, they always do Bikes and Bombers as another open house Lancaster engine run event. Sadly, 2019 was not a good year for this event. It just poured, absolutely poured with rain all day. But this is normally one of our best open house days, certainly one of our most profitable. These guys spend a lot of money and are very generous with the donation box as well. You can see here the Lank engine run, the rain coming down, everybody's sort of huddled and cold and well jacketed for the day. And this is the workshop area where we have the mosquito, of course, and they had just recently completed the Grand Slam bomb, looking very much in parallel to the mosquito here. Another project that we began in the summer of 2019 was the restoration of the horizontal stabilizer. We had to pull this out of storage and take a good long look at it. What we've got going on here is Ken all suited up and completely covered and protected because he's got a power sander here and he's actually sanding the surface off of the horizontal stab. Now he's not sanding the wood. What happened here is that Spartan was operating out of unprepared strips, a lot of dirt and gravel, and the horizontal stabilizers were getting badly damaged out of these strips. The props and wheels would pick up a lot of rocks and they'd throw them and into the stab, and the rocks would penetrate the stab and do a lot of damage. So what they did is that they coated the horizontal stabilizer in epoxy and fiberglass. And of course, to remove the skins, we had to get through all of the fiberglass and epoxy and get access to the inspection ports and the fasteners that held the skins onto the structure of the stab. So once all that grinding was done by Ken and Don and a couple of other people, then the skins came off. This is only 2 mil plywood here. And the fact that we could peel off a complete section of skin tells you what's going on with the glue. This is not a good sign that we could peel off the whole skin. It means that the glue has pretty much given up the ghost here. The dark areas on the skin tells you that there's some dry rot setting in. So the structure was still relatively good, but we'll be replacing the skins on the horizontal stab here. Back to Hurricane work now. Andy off to the side here. We're picking up the propeller for the Hurricane from Aero Propellers in Calgary after the thing got a full overhaul. Bit of a frustrating experience with these guys because we had been pushing them for a year to get the propeller completed because the airplane was coming to completion and we needed the prop. And we heard every version of every excuse imaginable. And this is after they had the prop in their shop for 7 years in total. Very frustrating trying to get a finished product out of these guys. But we did eventually. Andy and I hauled it up to Wetaskiwin, and you can see it here installed on the airframe. This was a really significant day in our history here because the Hurricane, essentially complete, was hauled outside. You can see they're actually fueling the thing. And this was the very first day that we had attempted an engine start. This is early in September of 2019. If you've been following along with us, you know that we had all kinds of difficulties in getting the thing to run. And the process of problem solving and learning and doing all of that stuff dragged on for better than 6 weeks. And I was back and forth to Wetaskiwin numerous times, as was Andy and John Phillips and other people too. You know, we had videographers and we had contributors to the project who were coming out every time we thought we had the problem solved. And we didn't, of course. Unfortunately, a delivery date had been set, parties had been planned, and we had to deliver the airplane whether it was running or not. So after several weeks of this, that's me just enjoying the thrill of restoring an airplane that you can't get running. And of course, at the end of October, we had a members open house day up at Wetaskiwin. We used to do these every year, of course, so people could see the project making good progress. And finally, outside in the sunshine, you know, a fabulous day. We had a good turnout of people there. In the upper left-hand corner, we've got Byron Reynolds and Greg Davis and Buck Hills, the people most responsible for the restoration of the airframe under our supervision, of course. Me standing on the wing there, and I have a nice letter from pilot Gordon Hill congratulating us on the completion of the airplane. We did a little cough and sputter start on the airplane. Still don't have it running right, and that's planned to be repaired later this summer. A few days later, it was time to bring our baby back home, deliver it to Calgary, heading south on the number 2 highway. This was a tremendous day, actually. Had a lot of fun watching other people watch this airplane as we went down the road. Even when we could pull over to clear that left-hand lane, a lot of people wouldn't go past the airplane. They were simply enjoying the incredible sight of seeing this Hurricane trucking down the road here. It was a long day. We didn't actually get it delivered until about 2 a.m. But yeah, it all arrived in one piece. A huge thanks to Rangeland Truck and Crane for doing an outstanding job of delivering the airplane safe and sound. And of course, early in November of 2019, handover to the city of Calgary, parties, celebrations, very much focused on Gordon Hill, of course, as this was in a sense his airplane. Very happy the way it worked out. Gordon had family coming from all across Canada to be with him on this day. He had friends who actually came from Belgium for this occasion as well. The mayor was there to accept the handover, and you know, all kinds of good things happening that day. Sadly, in November, we also lost this gentleman. This is Lionel Clark, and Lionel was a very early member in our organization and a tremendous supporter. He could be a crusty old guy too, and wasn't afraid to take a whack at you with his walking stick occasionally. But sadly, we lost Lionel, and we certainly will miss him. Moving into December, more of Gary's work here. He did a lot of woodwork around the canopy opening on the mosquito fuselage here. This was a problem area for the airplane virtually from day one, and I'm not sure that de Havilland ever completely solved it. Lots of complaints about leaks here, rain getting in, fumes getting into the airplane. So Gary's done a lot of work here to try and seal up this area and rebuild it properly so that we can get a decent fit. Yeah, that's a lot of clamps, Gary. Wrapping up 2019 here with this photo, the gentleman on the far left here is Kevin Forster, and Kevin Forster was our point of contact with the city of Calgary since it was probably late 2008. Now, we had begun dealing with somebody else at the city of Calgary who made it abundantly clear that he did not favor our efforts to retain the mosquito and the hurricane in Canada. He favored selling the airplane. He took a bit of a misstep and fell into a large political hole. I won't say he was pushed, but draw your own conclusions. Kevin took over, and Kevin was a tremendous supporter of our efforts and our intentions for, well, 13 years or something. Kevin was a tremendous gentleman, helping to guide us through the city process, managing our requests for our proposals and reports and meetings at City Hall. And Kevin would come out and do an inspection on our restoration progress on both airplanes every year. Kevin retired at the end of 2019. We have met his replacement, Sean Roach. Sean came down and spent an afternoon with us down in Nanton, and we gave him a great tour of the mosquito project. Again, seems like a super guy, very enthusiastic, took a real interest. We thought the meeting would be an hour, handshake and farewell, but he stayed for the entire afternoon and just seemed really genuinely interested. So we're glad to have a new contact with the city of Calgary as well. At the end of the year, CBC, as part of their As It Happens Christmas Eve program, always does a reading of Frederick Forsyth's wonderful story, The Shepherd, about the mosquito and vampire. And after the reading, they normally do interviews with veterans, mosquito people, and all this sort of thing. And for a couple of years, I've been a part of that after party stuff, talking about our project, about mosquitoes generally. So nice to get a little coast to coast coverage on that as well. 2020 kicks off. I'm not sure the part number of these very essential bits at the bottom of the picture here, courtesy of Jack, who supplies us with a dozen every Saturday morning. Get us all fueled up on sugar and fat to keep us going for the day. Gary, again, taking a look at the wing of the airplane. Now it's mounted in kind of a vertical way, so the leading edge is down towards the floor. One of the first things we wanted to know about this wing is what kind of shape it was in. You can see it looks very weathered and water damaged on the upper surface, sadly because someone had left it outside. But we had no idea what the inside of the wing looked like. And the upper skin is actually double layered. So even if you remove some of the underside of the wing, you can't get a look at what's going on topside. So Gary has actually carved 3 little holes in the upper skin of the wing, so we could put a borescope in there and get a look down the inside. And we're very fortunate that the damage to the wing seems to be limited mostly to the surface. So the inside of the wing looks good. There is a bit of water damage along some of the joints, but thankfully it didn't soak through and damage most of the wing itself. Here we are back at the horizontal stabilizer. The guy's working away. We've got Cam and Roger and Michael's hands just holding a rib there. Most of these ribs were removed from the horizontal stab after it was put in this jig, or strong back, as Jack calls it. Again, glue issues, so re-gluing most of the parts and keeping the thing structurally rigid as we remove the parts a few at a time, put them back in, remove some more parts, and off you go. For those of you who know the Mosquito, this is a set of rudder pedals being machined from a billet of aluminum. I believe the originals were actually cast aluminum, but we don't have any for our airplane. They disappeared into the trunk of somebody's car many years ago and have not resurfaced. We've been keeping our eyes open, looking for a pair that we could purchase. And after 10 years, none were to be found. So we're extremely fortunate to have a good working relationship with the people out in Windsor, Ontario, who are working on their own mosquito project. Several years ago, we loaned them our ailerons so that they could disassemble and reverse engineer them for their own project. And as payment for our generosity, they in turn have been generous with us and made us a set of rudder pedals. So just showing their progress here, and we'll hopefully see those later this year. Jack and Andy here. Andy is kind of specialized on interior components of the fuselage. I can see a trim wheel there, and we've got controls for elevator, I believe. You can see some of Andy's good work here, before and afters. Many hours of scraping and cleaning and adjusting and all that sort of stuff to get things looking good as new here. Again, more publicity on the hurricane completion into early 2020. And these are mostly courtesy of John Chalmers out of Edmonton, who again is a very early supporter of our project. And John likes to sit at his keyboard. He does a very nice job of documenting the history. We throw a few photos at him. And these things go out to publications in Canada and all around the world. And our thanks to John for following up on those. Nice photo here of our hurricane while we're talking about it. This is Boundary Bay, BC, and I believe this is early 1943. This is our airplane, of course, 5389, and with the tail jacked up like this and people laying on the wings, it's likely that what they're doing is aiming and test firing the guns here. So unfortunately, we didn't acquire this picture until after we had finished the airplane, but still, it's great to have it, and it simply confirms a lot of our work on the color and markings of the airplane. Now, with COVID shutdowns in April of 2020, several of the restoration crew took little projects home. Jack brought these in, and these are the panels, fuselage panels, that fit right under the wing. So they're between the bottom of the wing and the bomb bay. And these panels carry a lot of systems for the airplane, hydraulic lines, fuel lines, control lines, all that sort of thing. So just starting the restoration process, we'll photograph every square inch of these things, document what went where, then remove the mechanical components, and then start the paint stripping on these. And once that's complete, you can see that this is what it looks like at the end of that part of the process. And from there, we look at any structural repairs that are required and then reprime the thing and then start reinstalling the bits and pieces that belong on these components. Gary took a couple of projects home as well. This is a wingtip, of course, pretty complicated bits on the airplane. They've got the wingtip lights, they've got grounding straps, they've got electrical systems, there are drain holes. There's a lot going on here. Gary had to rebuild the wingtip bow, and of course it's not a constant radius, so some challenges there. And also the skins were in very poor shape. So you can see he's managed to retain a lot of the interior structure and simply supplement that with the bow and the skins on it. We were also very fortunate in 2020 to host the story on our Facebook page of the restoration of the prototype Mosquito. Jack and Colette went and visited the de Havilland Heritage Center, I think it was 2008 or 2009, made contact with the good folks there. And then Bob Glasby, who was intimately involved in the restoration of this airplane, came to us in 2020 and said, look, would you guys like to host the story of the restoration of this airplane? So we were extremely grateful to be able to do that. I think it's an 8 or 9 part story. Simply go to our Facebook page, do some scrolling, and Bob has provided a great story about restoring this airplane, dozens and dozens of photographs. And we, as far as I know, we virtually had an exclusive on this, so well worth looking up and checking out. Back to Nanton here, Saturday. If you remember those underwing panels I was just talking about here, the guys cleaning the hydraulic lines that run along them. Again, we've got Peter here, Roger, Jerry, Michael, all turning their fingers black, cleaning these aluminum lines. They're very intricately connected to each other with some cord lacing here at various distances, quite complex. We've managed to save all that original and not have to relace them. Here's a couple of our young fellas, Andrew and Matthew, just handling a flap that's coming in from storage. Again, this was a new project that we began in 2020. You can see that again, the skins are quite badly damaged, large hole here, water damage and dry rot, all that sort of thing on the flaps. We're also playing with the vertical stab here. We had restored the back end of the fuselage here. That's the area where the vertical stab is mounted. Jack wanted to check it for fit to make sure that what we were doing was working. So probably for the first time since 1964, the vertical stab was mated to the fuselage. Thankfully, a good fit. You can see the original colors and markings from Spartan's days are still on the vertical stab. Our registration, CFHMS, the old red ensign, etc. There's some talk of wanting to preserve one side of this. We haven't completely decided that. We'll see how that shakes out in the future. Gary back with the flap here. So he's got a skin off the thing, taking a look at the structure. And as suggested, most of the skins have been replaced with the structure retained here. This has been a home project for Gary throughout 2020. Don working on his little project here. This is the access hatch in the fuselage. And this airplane has two access hatches, an exterior and an interior. And this portion that Don's working on actually forms part of the floor of the cockpit, and the navigator's feet would rest on this. You can see that there's a porthole window in it here. There's a latch, there's hinges on the other side. And this piece is comprised of both wood and micarta sort of substance. Don's put in a lot of hours putting new seals on this and really bringing it back to new. He has finished it off. It's sitting in a box and awaiting the time when we can reinstall it into the airplane. The other big thing that we began in 2020 was work on the wing itself. Relatively new volunteer here, Jerry, working away on the wing. That's him down here. And Jerry spent a couple of Saturdays removing all of the dozens of fasteners that hold these panels on. These are the panels that are underneath the fuel tank bays. And the fasteners, the interior nuts have come loose. And so, you know, it's a heck of a job getting those things off. The reason for the crowd around Jerry down at the bottom here is that he's just completed removing the last of the hardware. And this was the first underwing panel that we were removing from the airplane. So it's not that we're all supervising Jerry, he doesn't need it, but we needed all hands on deck to remove that panel. And you can see Jerry's gone on to remove various other panels. They're all gone. They've all been taken off now. We've started paint stripping the inside of the fuel tank bays, the bomb bay, the wheel wells, all that sort of thing. Again, not just restoring airplanes, but getting involved in other things too. For Remembrance Day in 2020, services for the city of Calgary were held up at the Hangar Flight Museum, where the Hurricane is now displayed. And the Hurricane made a tremendous backdrop to all of the events and speeches of that day. This is Mayor Nenshi again, getting a good look at the Hurricane this time. And because we couldn't have crowds up at the museum there, this was telecast all across southern Alberta. So a lot of people got to enjoy the sight of the Hurricane on Remembrance Day. And down here, we have a painted image of our Hurricane. This is done by artist Alan Botting. And the original was with Gordon Hill. The Canadian Aviation Historical Society, the CHS, chose this image as one of 12 for their 2021 calendar. So again, great exposure for our airplane and our work. And then over on the right side here, an outfit in the States called Murph's Models. You can look them up there. They do very old school modeling using heavy card stock. And we were thrilled to see that they have chosen not just a Mosquito, but our very airplane for one of their models. This is what the world did before plastic models were available and popular. They were made out of heavy paper stock. So you can actually go to the website, pay the guy $5 or $8 or something. He'll give you access to the plans. You print them out at home on your computer printer, and then grab your best scissors, cut them out, shape them, and glue them together. You have a 1/42nd scale version of our airplane. So cool stuff. Into the fall of 2020 now, this incredible collection of what looks like junk used to be, and hopefully will again be, an Airspeed Oxford. The Bomber Command Museum had the remains of several Airspeed Oxfords. But the museum up at Penhold, Alberta, the Harvard Historical Society, is restoring an Oxford up there because they were operated out of Penhold during the war. Bomber Command thought that they wouldn't get to this project for 100 years or more, and thought it would be better served by going to Penhold. So here's the guys coming down on a Saturday with a great big trailer, picking up all the Oxford bits. And we're kind of grateful because this big center section that you see here was actually stored behind our wing. And so with it gone, we've got access room and we've got a bit of storage room. And so we were very happy to help them remove their treasures. Some more about our wing. On the left side, what we have here is the trailing edge of the port side of the wing here. You can see that the wood's pretty rough here, but we're starting to remove all the mechanical bits, the metal bits from the trailing edge. And then we have Chris over on the right side doing the same for the leading edge. Now, because the wing is currently mounted with the leading edge downwards towards the floor, poor Chris has spent many Saturdays on his back with the dirt falling in his eyes, removing all the mechanical components from the leading edge of the wing. So we're well into this, this project as well. A couple of other things. Gary, of course, had rebuilt the wingtips, but we were missing the wingtip light lenses. And these have been quite a challenge. We talked to guys in New Zealand who have brand new in the box, several sets, and they, after an initial offer, quit communicating with us, so I don't know what happened there. The guys in Windsor have tried making their own as well, and they were totally dissatisfied with the finished product. So eventually Gary said, you know what, I think I can figure this out myself. So he's built himself a mold and a jig here to create a set of wingtip lenses. Over on this side, you can see that the ribs on the horizontal stab are all primed here, meaning everything's been repaired and it's time to start covering it. We've got one skin on the stab here. And then over here, we've got Davy's jig with all the metal bits from the center section of the horizontal stab. He's removed these, done a nice cleanup and restoration on most of them before they get reinstalled in the tail section here. I was into the museum in early March, and Gary had dropped off some of his home projects. You can see his lovely wingtips here, awaiting the lights and lenses, and the flap that he's been working on for quite some time. So the internals are all repaired. He's got new skin on the leading edge here. This one's not yet attached, so that'll be coming up over the next couple of months, I'm sure. Anyway, I think that's about it for what we've been up to for the last couple of years. That's all, folks. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that we'll see you down at the museum within the next few weeks or next couple of months. Thank you.